Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Welcome to episode 233 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Paris, and this is Chris.
Hello.
All right, well, when you're hearing this, it's going to be winter up here in the Northern Hemisphere. So why not explore a memoir that flirts with self-help, specifically made for the season? I was looking for more nonfiction stuff for the show and saw this book on a list of popular self-help books. Published by Penguin in 2020, Wintering has risen to notoriety like so many books before it, thanks to being featured on Oprah and then NPR, the New York Times, and various other popular media outlets. Knowing nothing about it beyond its title and being generally suspicious of anything that sort of glances off of self-help, I felt like this was the right choice.
Yourselves. Everyone just grin and bear it.
No. You know what I mean. It felt like the right choice to close out the year here on TBC. So get a nice blanket, maybe a stuffed creature, a hot beverage, maybe light a candle or incense, or maybe you get a hearth fire going if you've got the ability to do that, and snuggle in. And I'm saying this while we are beneath the humidity and heat dome in June.
Yeah,
so it feels a little weird.
Man. So maybe hearing this book will make me feel colder. One of those things like, oh, I'm just going to think about being icy and maybe it'll prevent me from dying of heat stroke. I want to try to do that.
Yeah, this is another weird thing. Obviously we did not know what the temperature was going to be when we were recording this episode. So this is kind of bonkers. We're going to be talking about winter and snow and ice and cold, my favorite season. While Chris and I are both wallowing in the swampy heat of June in New England.
This is our final recording session for season 10, and I'm glad that we've sort of raced the heat here. My goal next year is to be done well before we have to engage with any fans and air conditioners, because I don't have my air conditioners on while we're recording because I'm an audio idiot that just refuses to live in comfort because God forbid that there's a whirring sound in the background.
Yeah, Chris, you always are able to manage my fan sound, so I don't really understand this. I think we got to get Chris into therapy about this.
I'm in therapy.
Well, now you got to add a new topic. I don't want to turn my AC on. Help. Okay. If this is your first time listening to the show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So we're doing the opposite of what most people are doing when they are browsing a bookstore or browsing the internet and looking for something to read. Usually, this experiment results in a hilarious and disappointing read, but once in a while, we end up liking or even loving the book. In addition to our usual barnyard language, our typical swearing routine, today's episode includes discussion or mention of, you get a little injury and surgery up front, but mostly this is about mental health struggles. So, if mental health stuff is not your jam today, maybe choose a different episode to listen to.
I hate mental health stuff.
Maybe if you are struggling right now and that's not something you want to hear about is what I'm trying to say. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the back of the book. I actually have the physical book this time. So what does the back of the book tell me? What does it do to try to pull me into the snowdrifts of wintering? Wintering is a poignant and comforting meditation on the fallow periods of life, times when we must retreat to care for and repair ourselves. Katherine May thoughtfully shows us how to come through these times with the wisdom of knowing that, like the seasons, our winters and summers are the ebb and flow of life.
Is this book, hey, you win some, lose some? Like, that's what the theme is here?
No, it's more like a white lady with highlights and a cardigan and a latte, like telling you things are going to get better eventually. It's kind of like that.
Okay.
More
Great.
that.
It's like, all right, lady, I don't really have generational wealth to fall back on, but you know.
Yeah.
She's like, I win some and then I win some. You will lose some.
All right. So our characters and setting here, we are in somewhere in the British Isles, UK. I'm actually not sure if Catherine May is English or Welsh or Scottish or Irish.
Self-help books have a setting.
British?
Like, you know, they're not like geographically located things, right? It's just like all of you should be able to do this.
Yeah, but I'm telling you about it. It's really more of a memoir, not really. So it's a memoir that, like I said, it sort of skirts along the side. It's got like self-help sprinkles in it, but it's not. It's a memoir. So
I thought it was one of these things where it's like, here's a listicle in a very long form about like, hey, you should make your bed, and then maybe what if you manage your finances.
No, sorry, I should have just looked up where this woman lives. She mentions town names and stuff, and it's written with a British tone, so I presume somewhere in the UK. But
okay.
I don't think it's that important, other than like knowing that area of the world, the governments there generally take better care of their people than over here in their former colonies. So, keep that in mind, I guess. But otherwise,
fair.
We're in the UK somewhere, maybe somewhere close by to that. This is, our characters are Katherine, her spouse H, I don't know, just goes by the initial, and son Bert, even though that seems needless when you can easily Google this information.
Why does her son get a full name and her husband's like, no, just H. I refuse to be named. You can't even give me a fake name. Just give me a letter.
Yeah, it's a little strange choice, but I suppose it was probably his insistence. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. We've got various people that are interviewed and some friends of Catherine's make an appearance. But mostly this is about, Catherine's internal struggle with some things that happen in her life. And she is saying that you can treat your internal winters with the strategies that we use to survive the external winters. Kind of. Okay. She's sort of suggesting that without directly saying it. So that's sort of what we got going on here.
I have to insulate the windows of my brain by putting plastic wrap over the drafty parts.
Yeah. It's more like you have to extremely heat and then extremely cool your brain to get rid of the depression and anxiety. It's a lot of that kind of thing. So,
all right.
Okay. Here is my little very brief summary of sort of the contents of the book before I get into how I felt about it. I didn't want to do a really prolonged summary because a lot of it is just her sort of ruminating and talking about how she feels. And there are some things that happen, but this isn't like a narrative. It's also there's not like instructions. So because it was so fluffy, I felt like it deserved an equally floofy little summary. So not a whole lot going on here. All right. Catherine's husband's appendix bursts due to inattention in a hospital, and he must have surgery and extended care due to the ensuing infection. A week prior to this, she had quit her job. They have a young son, so this is all a lot, and yeets her into what she coins wintering, an involuntary but inevitable liminal stage of transition that is, quote, lonely and painful, end quote. She encourages the reader not to hide from this pain or pretend not to see it in others, but rather to invite these periods in and learn how to bear them comfortably by taking notes from how non-human animals and Northern Europeans survive long, sunless winters. Engage in the, quote, unfashionable, end quote, and let them be the crucible from which a new version of you emerges in spring. Shortly after her husband is recovered, Katherine herself takes ill with abdominal pain and must stop her new job. For a good 80 pages or so, we think she is dying of abdominal cancer, but it turns out that she just needs to not eat fiber, which really rips a good chunk of the gravitas away from the project early on.
Okay. Just like too much broccoli or something.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh at someone's pain, but like the setup is so dramatic, and then you're like, this lady just needs to like fart and eat less fiber. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Yeah, it was a little
holding
bit of
the internal
tone
gas
shift.
to heat her brain for her mental winter when she really just could have like opened the valve.
Yeah, I was like trying to take it seriously, and then that happened, and I was like, man, I don't want to minimize some of the suffering, but the way the book was building it up, it seemed as though she had a terminal illness. And so I was like, damn, this book's going to be like hard. And then that happened, and I was like, oh no. Then the world of the book started tilting, and things started getting a little weird after that. So that's our transition point, I guess. So, she's on sick leave and had an Icelandic vacation planned already. So she goes to Iceland on vacation, gets a cold while she's there, talks to various Finnish people about how to thrive despite a cold climate, bakes bread, saunas, does cold plunges, and starts homeschooling her child. The usual progression.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that just sounds like podcast bro 101 is what that is.
Yeah, watch Nara Smith is going to jump out of the fucking end of the book at me. Eventually, she talks to some insect experts and explores the community-focused lives of ants and bees and how their interconnectedness sustains them. Katherine then loses her voice and takes singing lessons to regain it. She closes by reminding us to welcome in the dark and treat ourselves with kindness and love to recover from our own winters.
Okay.
Yep.
So, lady has a lot of medical issues, takes a little European vacation, and is like, well, these people go through cold. Oh, all right. That's real loose, man. That's like a bag of loosely connected ideas that is just sort of jumbling around. And she's like, I think, I made it through. Which I don't want to discount anyone's struggle and however you get through your shit is how you get through your shit. But boy, I wouldn't. That doesn't sound well researched.
Yeah, so let's start talking about the rubric. Actually, before we go to the rubric, did you have any questions or initial thoughts besides what you already shared?
Why did the bugs come into it?
Because they both, like all animals, certain species of ants and bees have like certain processes to kind of get them through winter, like certain habits or what am I trying to say? Not processes or habits, but there's different stages of the year, and in winter they have to hibernate or prepare for the oncoming cold. So, but I don't know. She just wanted to talk about community, I guess, and that was her way to get there through the winter door.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like the real obvious open door of like, what animal, what creature has community? Oh, hives. I'll just talk about hives.
Yeah.
Even though humans are not at all like, okay.
Yeah. Yep. So.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. So, all right. So how did I feel about Wintering? The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine May. How did it measure up against our rubric? Let's find out together. Like bees and ants.
Bees and ants find things out to get, like, I guess, if they're a hive, one bee is like, oh no, there's a nice flower over there, and they do the bee dance. Don't bees dance at each other to like tell each other about flowers?
Honestly, dude,
my brain is as loosely connected as this book is right now, man. The heat is just melting my neurons apart.
All right, let's talk about technical construction. So this was published by Penguin in 2020. We got a major publisher here.
Appropriate.
Yep. Oh God, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, you're right. Well, there are penguins in parts of the world that aren't covered in ice, so keep that in mind. Anyway, in terms of like typos and formatting and punctuation, largely fine. Weirdly, there were quite a few like typos and word confusion in this, like more than 5 in what was a relatively short book from a major publisher. So I felt like that was a little strange. I don't know. It was 2020. They were like, we don't have anyone who can do this. Maybe I'm not really sure.
Yeah, famously, book editors can't work from home or whatever.
Yeah, it's impossible.
They have to be in a group to do their book. They have to be in a hive. You see, like book editors are like bees or ants. You see, when we can learn so much from them.
Yes. So anyway, there was nothing really wrong with it. There were just several typographical errors that really stuck out to me. So just felt I'd mention it. The formatting was just, it's broken up into months and subchapters. I didn't hate it because it was, it's just some
nice, easy chronological order thing. The classic way to arrange a book in order of time.
So the prologue is called Indian Summer, which I guess I don't love that title. But then there's, October, and the sub chapters are called Making Ready, Hot Water, Ghost Stories, and then it's November section, and then December section with like Light, Midwinter, Epiphany. So those were fine. I had no issues there. It was structured appropriately, yada yada. So Tactical Construction's a 1. This book's, nothing too wild there.
Yeah, we don't have to hibernate here forever. We can just move right on through this season.
All right, so we're going to spend a lot of time in the content section. So obviously there's no plot construction because this isn't a narrative story, but we'll talk about the content that is in here. This sort of memoir that sniffs at self-help. I'm not really sure what to call it. It suggests some things, perhaps. I don't know that. So I was going to say, lastly, I'm not going to talk about like character quality in this because this book does not focus on people's, personalities or developing that or anything. It's just about Katherine and her experiences. And I honestly don't even know that there's much of a separation between like rules following and coherence. It's kind of all together. So it's going to be one big section. So,
okay.
This
once
is what
again, loosely jumbled together, much like the book itself. The books always reflect our episode, I find.
I know, it's weird. So anyway, let's talk about just the meat of the book here and how I felt reading it. So this is, as it is a type of memoir. It's a very personal book with no outright self-help strategy. So the book doesn't seem to set itself up that way, but other parties external have like put it on lists for self-help and things like that. So it's a little bit of a weird category. We are just sort of like on a wandering little snowdrift through wintry themes, and it's a lot of considering how like rest can renew you, which seems like a really fucking obvious concept.
This all seems very surface level to me at first blush, Paris.
Yeah, it's definitely more fluffy memoir than self-help is my point. And I guess I can read a part of it that sort of felt like maybe not a mission statement, but like a re-emphasis of the primary idea. So this is page 139. But if happiness is a skill, then sadness is too. Perhaps through all those years at school, or perhaps through other terrors, we are taught to ignore it, to stuff it down into our satchels and pretend it isn't there. As adults, we often have to learn to hear the clarity of its call. That is wintering. It is the active acceptance of sadness. It is the practice of allowing ourselves to feel it as a need. It is the courage to stare down the worst parts of our experience and to commit to healing them the best we can. Wintering is a moment of intuition, our true needs, felt keenly as a knife. So that's like one of the parts where she kind of restates the idea. Hopefully that's helpful to hear. So, in a bizarre coincidence, as Terrible loves to bestow upon us, I, too, went through at least part of what Katherine is going through in the book last winter. So, I can't expand upon it much, but the important points are that my husband was hit by a car. So a year before you're hearing this happened, which of course required like emergency surgery and hospitalization and long rehab. And neither of us have children, and I hadn't like just quit my job like the author, but the trauma of the accident added to it, certainly. Point being is I very much understand the depths that this can throw one into if you suddenly need to become a caretaker while juggling other things, whether that's a child or a job or both. And I was fortunate.
Or some stupid podcast at the same time.
Yeah, some stupid podcast. I was fortunate enough to be able to take like FMLA and use sick time so that I could work part-time while helping my husband through his recovery and rehab. And even still, it completely derailed both of our lives. My husband couldn't work for a long time. We had a large network of friends that helped us. I have a job that provides, those affirmation benefits that allowed us to still continue despite it. I can work remotely. Like, there's a whole host of shit that really kept us afloat. And looking back on my own experience, I cannot imagine writing a book where I tell people to just grant yourself love and kindness and rest and be cured. And obviously everyone's experiences are different, and I don't want to trivialize anybody's struggles, but I do think you need to give them appropriate context. And in this book, it's considering what's not in the text. So we have a book here where a woman is recounting her experience grappling with like depression and anxiety brought on by her spouse's illness, her own health scare, a job transition, and her child struggling in school. Yet, nowhere, not once, does she ever consider talking to a healthcare professional or seeking therapy. I find this pretty concerning. Pretty concerning. You know, it's a little strange to read a book about someone's mental health struggles, and at no point do they consider like, maybe I should try talk therapy or talk to a doctor about this or talk to a friend about what I'm going through. I just, after I'd finished with it, I was like, that's a really bizarre piece of this that's not included.
Also, why wouldn't you talk to mental health professionals about this idea, at least, or at least someone that has done some research related to the field? This really, right now, seems to me to be the tale of a woman who kind of withdrew into herself and allowed herself some restful time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole story. And when she thought about, some bugs while she was on vacation at the same time.
Yeah, and so I find it concerning because obviously it's not directly stated, but the underpinning suggestion there, if you read it as I did, is that just push through and do what you want and it'll get better. And it's like, that's not really true for most people. I don't know if I can say most, but for a lot of people, many people, I think I can say. So it's a little, like you said, it's a little surface level.
Are there any strategies offered besides like, hey, take a rest, or like gather your mental acorns in your tree so that you can squirrel them out later?
No, and again, like this is just her. This is a memoir, and not really. It's more like, hey, bitches, remember to take a break. And it's like, okay, I get it.
So the memoir is lady went through a handful of rough times and she's fine now?
Yes.
What depth is there, man?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why this had to be a book.
Yeah, and then the other part of it, the other thing that I find really concerning that's not present, is there's no discussion of the context or the means that the author has to weather such a winter, right? So there's no discussion of money, familial support, living in a country that doesn't completely forsake its ill or unemployed, and maybe that's a huge factor, right? There are two tiny moments where she sort of thinks about this, but then immediately is like, meh, 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 and like talks about something else. So I can find
Does she even connect the whole like bee and ant community into like, wow, it's sure nice that I have healthcare access, or like,
no,
my friends are helping me at least? Does she talk about someone like giving her some soup at least one time, Paris?
Yeah,
come on.
She goes for swims with her friends, and it's like swim community, and that's like what she's talking about.
Why do I care?
Yeah, I don't know. Page 237. The ants aren't entirely wrong, though. Winter does carry its own labors, and preparations can be made for future periods of dearth that we can't quite yet imagine. We have always been instructed to save, of course, although many of us find it impossible to stretch budgets that far these days. Even if we do save, it's of limited use. My own savings were obliterated in one fairly brutal sweep when a sickly pregnancy left me unable to work, and then childcare cost more than I earned. It doesn't take much. Ordinary things, nothing more. The margins of adult life are narrow. We are told to live within our means, but there are times when, frankly, I feel that my means would be a caravan on waste ground. Instead, I suspect that most of us have periods of feast and famine in our lives, and increasingly, we spend the feast years paying off the debts of the famine. It's only money, as a friend of mine often says with a sigh. So she's like hinting at, hey, money is a part of this, but that's one paragraph in a 275-page book. And it never really comes up. And she also doesn't share her own background as to how she got through this and like all the help she received. Like there's no... and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she doesn't have that help.
Earlier, you kind of batted away my diagnosis of this book as you win some, you lose some. But that's all I'm hearing right now.
Yeah.
Is just throwing your hands up, be like, whatever, man, it'll work out. Which isn't a totally invalid philosophy sometimes. But if you're trying to write a book about the practice of, chilling out for a little bit, I would like there to be more depth than like, well, for me personally, it kind of worked out.
Yeah, and so I feel like there's just this gaping maw of like finances and circumstance in this quaint little book about going on an eternal vacation because life sucks sometimes. Just a big old black hole in the glacier here. And it's just, for me, it's simply impractical to tell people to just opt out of life when things get rough, like drop out of life with bong in hand, bro. Like, yeah, what?
Drop out of life with Sir Stroming in hand. Follow the stink to the ice land. Paris, does she ever even think about or mention people who are in like severe poverty or like anything where it's like, no, it really sucks for these people.
No.
They're wintering all the time.
That's the thing. There's never a consideration that some people are trapped in eternal winter, right? There's no consideration of that. And like, okay, hang on. Here's the quote early in the book where she's like, this is what you have to do. But I know, too, that I have spent most of my life trying to push winter away, having rarely had to truly feel its bite. Growing up in Southeast England, Southeast England is our setting. I forgot that. Where snow is a rarity and the darkness can always be repelled with a light bulb, I have never had to prepare for winter. I have never had to endure months of brutal cold or being cut off. In Iceland, where roads will soon close after the first snowfalls and life has to cling tenaciously to the windswept lava, I have learned something about keeping warm. Here, on the deck of the Andrea in the outer reaches of the Atlantic, and approaching a personal winter, I'm suddenly certain the cold has healing powers that I don't yet come close to understanding. After all, you apply ice to a joint after an awkward fall. Why not do the same to a life? My response to that is that most people cannot freeze their lives. Like, it's just sorry. Yeah. It's just not a practical solution. And
that's also a bit of a strained simile there where it's like, well, winter is happening and we have to close our roads. So like ice can heal because it is tamping the inflammation in your swollen leg. Like how cold here is depression. She is melding cold as depression and loneliness with cold as inflammation reducer. And, in some ways, if this was in a poem, like you could perhaps weave those together in a nice way that makes me think of those things. But in a memoir of some lady who, sure, I'm not saying she had a dandy old time having to deal with her husband's sickness and like losing her job. That's not what I'm like. I'm not trying to say, oh, well, you had it easy, so fuck you. It is just, why? What are you showing me here that I'm supposed to take away other than, once again, you win some, you lose some, just hang on for a little bit.
Yeah, I also felt that way at the end of the book. I was like, I don't know that I'm not getting any insights out of this. And I'll talk a little bit more about how much weirder this gets. But the other thing missing, like I already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we don't hear about how she, her husband, and her son were helped by others during this period. And of course, you could just assume that they were not. But I feel like they must have been. Again, there's no discussion of the financial or social circumstances, economic landscape, country that they live. Like, there's no examination of the support undergirding this whole project, right? So that bothers me.
It seems like her revelation was, I shouldn't try to tamp down feeling sad all the time. Maybe I let it wash over me a little bit so I can truly process it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, there are some turns of phrases in here that are quite beautiful. There are some moments where I feel like she does arrive at something useful, like what you just pointed out, like not running from sadness, but allowing yourself to feel negative emotions and processing them. I think that's a good message, but it's sort of just mixed up in this mucky, icy mud with all this other shit that I just don't agree with. So I don't know. It's tough for me because, like I said, there are some little shimmering glimmers here and there of great writing and some things that I agree with, but I don't know, the whole project just sort of doesn't do it for me. This, like you've already pointed out without me really even saying much, this does feel weirdly disjointed. It's like that classic joke we've told on the show many times where the author comes up with a title and then tries to make something that fits the title, even when it doesn't really. So winter is literally the season and also an emotional state and also a stage of life. And somehow you can treat the inner winter with tactics from outer winter, according to the author, which starts to feel weirdly like sympathetic magic or some like debunked theory of medicine from 500 years ago. And so she's knitting together these disparate anecdotes around a theme, and they're sort of connected, but sometimes we really get off course. Like, there's the wolf guy chapter. Hang on, let me just read part of the wolf guy chapter. Dude, yeah, I just started to feel like, what is happening here? I'm gonna read maybe a little too much of this because I kind of want I want listeners to feel as like whiplashed as I did. So the previous chapter to this was called Darkness. And this is about her going on a trip to Tromsø in the northern Norway in the Arctic Circle. It's kind of like the lower edge of the Arctic Circle where Tromsø is. It's not like the upper reaches. So she goes there while she's pregnant. This is like well before the events of the book takes place too, which is also kind of like, I don't know. And it was one of those like, she really shouldn't have been traveling because she was so far along, but her doctor was like, okay, I think you're all right. You can do it, but you got to be real careful. Don't do too much.
She's like, and you know what, Doc, I'll win some, I'll lose some. Let's see what happens.
But the doctor did approve her to go, so it was fine. But she gets there and she's kind of having a hard time, and they're there during the part of the year where it's dark most of the time. They see I think they went on a trip to see the Aurora Borealis or something. Yeah, she goes to visit some Sami people, the indigenous reindeer folks, and just talking about how they're cool in the winter and like what reindeers mean for them, and she learns how extraordinary the dark can be, and they treat her really, the Sami treat her really well because she's pregnant. I don't know. Again, the book was really starting, like, the tilting began, or, like, maybe 80 pages in, and then it started getting, like, more and more, like, not, more and more tangential, I guess. So that chapter ends, and then we go into hunger. I walk in the late January frost, and I realize that I am a wolf today. I had already been overcome by the need to prowl, to go outside and stalk about my territory, restless and wary. There's an unrest in my gut that feels like hunger.
Paris, this is shift to romance all of a sudden. What the fuck are you doing to me?
It's the sun is low, making gold streaks in the desiccated grasses that line my path. I am alert to birds, to the sudden bustle of movement in the bare red brambles. My mouth craves, and I cannot tell what it would make me do if I didn't stalk. Never having been a smoker in my life, I am craving a cigarette just for the sense of occupation it would lend to my tongue and my lips, just for the feeling of transgression. Otherwise, I think it would be a drink at this time in the morning. My mouth wants it. It wants the disruption of a long, intense swallow and the daze it might bring. I suddenly see why cigarettes are a lesser evil in those dark, disrupted moments when the mouth will use anything to avoid crying out its pain. Instead, I walk. I have learned to walk at these moments. I have learned to walk until the heat goes out of it. Then there's like a break. You know how books will use like a symbol for like a sort of a continuity break or idea break. I once met a man who tracked wolves. He turned up at the launch party for an anthology I'd edited, A Friend of a Friend. I quickly lost interest in anything else that was going on in the room. All my carefully nurtured authors had to fend for themselves. The Wolfman was the only game in town. There was a quality about him, a stark, intent gaze, that I found utterly captivating. He had no artifice, no social nicety. Instead, he had something wild, elemental. It's hard to put into words
not beating
without
the
sounding...
shift to romance charges I've laid against this.
Yeah. Yeah, Exhibit A is pretty damning. It's hard to put into words without sounding like an overboiled romance novel, particularly when, later that evening, you are attempting to explain your fascination with this man to your slightly startled husband. But my interest wasn't romantic. It was more like the call of the wild. It seemed to me that he was part wolf, and that, in his time living on the trail of those creatures that he clearly adored, he had absorbed some of their essence. He told me that he had begun. That's what I mean. He told me that he began his lupine career as an itinerant shepherd in the Greek mountains, trying to escape the pressure to get a proper job. As he was an Englishman, wolves had never featured much in his imagination, but here they were an ever-present threat, a predator for which he had to be continually watchful. He learned that wolves often kill more than they can eat, which leads to a reputation for killing for sport. On discovering an unattended flock of sheep, a wolf pack will likely slay the lot of them, rather than simply snatch one or two. Wolves could certainly be cruel on occasion, but what struck him with far more force was the cruelty of humans toward wolves. So anyway, she goes on talking about wolves and this guy.
Who she's definitely horny for a little bit.
Yeah,
just like a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. And then, like, that's just like a couple pages about how wolves were like hunted to near extinction and how they're associated with winter because people become ravenously hungry in the winter and wolves are ravenously hungry. And, you know, you're just like, why?
Yeah, okay,
you know?
yeah.
And then there's another, like, break, and it's like, in the depths of our winters, we are all wolfish. We want, in the archaic sense of the word, as if we are lacking something and need to absorb it in order to be whole again. These wants are often astonishingly inaccurate. Drugs and alcohol that poison instead of reintegrate. Relationships with people who do not make us feel safe or loved. Objects that we do not need and cannot afford, and which hang around our necks like albatrosses of debt long after the yearning for them has passed. For some of us, this doesn't signify much in the long term. We flourish again and pay off those debts, or someone steps in for us. But for others, the excesses of the dark times cast a long shadow that is not so easily dispelled. And then she talks about this person who, like, had a bunch of debt and, like, was, like, struggling to pay her debt. And now her life sucks because...
Which is like a wolf.
Because of the yearning. See what I mean? Like, you're just
hunt
like...
to excess.
Yeah.
This is so loosely woven together that, like, I don't even know if the threads are touching.
Yes, and then there are some times where we, you know, the meandering continues and she says things that make my head, like, tilt a full 90 degrees, like my neck could hear my neck snapping. And one of
You're
those
like a wolf who just heard something.
Yes.
And in your hearing like a wolf, that's kind of like healing from a hurt. One time my dad dropped me on my head and that I had to cry like the wolf.
Yes.
I was hungry.
Great job, Chris. You could have written a chapter in this book. So page 194, in children's literature, snowfall is the trigger for tables to turn. What does
Wait,
it? Like, what?
Is it?
What? I don't know. She's like...
Does she give an example?
It creates a moment in which the usual adult protectors are easily incapacitated and introduces a world in which children are agile and wild enough to survive. She talks about,
is
like,
there
the
a
lion,
British, like,
the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Box of Delights, The Dark is Rising, and I was like, I don't know if this is true because I haven't studied, like, children's literature in the UK. Like, I don't know, but it struck me as sort of a weird declarative,
like, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they come into
statement.
Narnia, like, during a snowy time in Narnia, so that's, I guess, about change, but how does that connect to your theme about winter as, like, a sad time where you heal?
Dude, I don't know. And then there's, like, a whole chapter about how she's like, oh yeah, by the way, I lost my voice and I wanted to talk and sing again, and no one ever knew what happened, but I took singing lessons and it came back. And then, you know, you're just like, okay. And she's like, you know, it's like...
This is ringing a bell. Wasn't there some other terrible book we read where someone, like, lost their voice and then they got it back?
Yes, the Dilbert guy. Dilbert author.
The Dilbert guy. That's right.
Yeah.
Is this some sort of, like, weird self-help author curse that gets passed around for, like, you know, Terriblo thinks you need to have something to write about, so, like, fuck your voice, and then it'll come back mysteriously after you take some voice lessons.
I don't know. This was connected to birds singing in the springtime and her coming out of the winter and being able to vocalize again. And of course, all of these things are very well timed because all of these events line up with all the right months. And I was sort of skeptical as to, like, whether that was true or not, I don't know. There's also just some weird other shit in here. Like, she's scared of Halloween. I don't know. That was kind of a weird thing to talk about.
Because it's in the winter?
No.
You see, like children, we all snatch the candy of our brains and try to hoard it.
He says,
so that you may survive the candyless winter.
No, she's talking about how it's a liminal period crossing from summer into winter, you know, because that's what autumn fucking is.
Yes, that's what you're talking about, autumn.
Into winter. You know, it's like, oh, it's a psychological crossing this time. And, you know, and so...
I don't totally disagree with that. You know,
I don't either. But her kid is excited about Halloween and she's not. So this is what happens. She says, "We don't do Halloween," I tell him as we pass yet another shop window full of skeletal remains and severed fingers. "It's not our tradition." "But why?" he says. I don't have a ready answer for that. Because it seems excessive to me, tacky, unnecessarily costly, and full of enervating new customs that do not happen by common consent. Because it's new, because Halloween night always feels like it's just about to veer into chaos, and I'm uneasy every time I pass a group of teenagers. Last year, we woke up on 1st November to find that our front door had been pelted with eggs, their shattered shells embedded in the paintwork. Despite having waited meekly by the door all evening to hand out sweets to anyone who knocked, I had somehow been targeted for a nasty trick. I told myself that it was random, while secretly imagining that they'd sniffed out my fear. Halloween is an overturning of the natural order, though, and has its lineage in old traditions reversing the roles, letting the poor become rulers and bringing the rich low. The real reason she's scared, there has long been a feverish link between monsters and mockery, and those without power have often been given license to play at the edges of civility in order to quell more dangerous lurches toward riot and rebellion. You know, which is true. But I don't know. I just thought it was funny that I just feel like the Karen checklist is really getting off
I was
book.
getting the vibe there where she's like, "Oh no, my front door and my front door only was egged, and that's why I'm scared of Halloween."
Of sharpness and doom. Like, all right, lady.
Like, lady, just wipe it off. It's fine.
Yeah,
you win some, you lose some.
Yeah,
you got the candy, and you also get egged. I thought that was your whole philosophy.
So anyway, I know all of this felt random, and that's because it felt that way in the book too, where you're reading these things and you're like, okay, I can kind of see this gossamer spiderweb-like thread barely there, you know, holding these together sort of, but I'm not really getting a lot out of it. And like you pointed out earlier, I didn't feel like there was quite as much impact as the reviews and the title purported there would be by the end of the book. Just getting like a take a vacation from life and try random alternative ways to regulate your mood, and it just didn't feel like it was wrapped up in a neat bow. And now my final huge problem with this book is I really wish it was just a memoir and she spent more time talking about how she felt internally and how, you know, and this weird, even though it does contain that, we skirt with self-help in a weird, indirect, suggestive way that I find troubling, especially because some of the ideas are shaky, let's say, unsupported, maybe actually outright not good in some cases. So here's some examples. So whenever she cites anything, she'll just cite like one study with no additional support or context. Like there's a point where she's talking about she of course does sauna, when she's in Finland. And then when she's home, she tries cold therapy. And when she talks about cold therapy, she's like, "Oh yeah, this study from like this guy Bullmore," and it was like a 20-year-old study. And I was like, I don't know, if you're writing a book in 2020 and you're citing a study that happened in 2000, that's kind of a gulf in the scientific timeline. And I would rather something more recent be cited that says like, and 10 or 15 years later, we're still finding that's true. And like this, and this, and like, here's a meta-analysis, like a little bit more scaffolding there to uphold this point she's making. And I don't know. I just feel like when you're suggesting that people jump into freezing oceans to cure their depression, I maybe think you should give a little more information about that, because like this Dr. Bullmore, he thinks that cold therapy, like jumping into the freezing ocean in the winter or taking really cold showers for so many minutes, can like fix depression and anxiety, because he believes that they're caused by inflammation in the brain, and that by being in the cold, it's literally like putting ice on your knee. I know nothing about this. It sounds wrong to me, but I am not a doctor or a scientist, so not this kind of scientist. I don't know what the veracity of those claims are. However, it definitely makes my like suspicion ears perk up, because so she's like, oh man, I just started doing like cold plunges because that's what they do in the Scandi countries. And then I went home and I just started jumping in the ocean, and it was so good. I just felt it really kept me in the moment, and I felt a lot better. And I get it. A lot of people do say that on both ends of the spectrum. A lot of people feel like they obtain clarity and cognition and a boost in mood from doing really hot sauna and also really cold ice plunges. So it's like, I know that is a common thing people say. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if people actually benefit from it. I also don't know that people should just do this without checking with a doctor, because you could have health conditions that are exacerbated and that can really hurt you if you are suddenly really hot or suddenly really cold, right? Like if you have heart issues or blood pressure issues, right? And a variety of other things. So to me, it's a little sketchy when she's like, oh man, those cold plunges, nothing's made me feel better than that. And it's like, well, it kind of sounds like you're telling me to jump in the fucking cold ocean, and I don't know if that's a great idea, you know?
All of this feels like a TikTok for you feed. This whole book feels like that, Chris. To me.
Oh.
Where I'm just like scrolling through random little disparate things that are trying to sell me on like, maybe this will help you, or maybe this will help you. And like, it's not bad to try some shit. And I think there is something to be said for like just disrupting your routine a little bit, even if it's just in a sensory way. Like, yeah, throw yourself into some cold water just to see like how it makes you feel for a second, just to kind of like
maybe after first consulting with a medical professional, because you don't want to do that if you have health problems.
Of course, but like the looseness of everything here and the way it just flits from one thing to the next, really just, it's like hitting that same like dopamine chain attempt that Instagram reels or TikTok feeds are doing. Like, have you considered wolves? Have you considered cold plunges? Have you considered taking a vacation to Iceland?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's like, I don't want people to feel like they can't talk about things that helped them, but I do want folks to be more careful and put guardrails on things, especially when they are talking about things that are as dicey as one's mental health or physical health, right? Like, we live in a world where people are so susceptible to mis and disinformation and hopping on trends without considering how that could be bad for them, right? And that's the thing about this that I don't like, is that I don't think it has proper context or padding, I guess, you know, for lack of a better word.
This is the equivalent of like me hearing something from a friend, and I think my consternation with that is that that's not stuff that should be put to published page. Right? Like, if you're having a loose conversation with your friend, you talk about her cold plunges and her vacation to Iceland, and like, I met this hot wolf guy one time. Like, why? Whatever. I make a conversation with a friend.
Yeah, fine.
Get to know him a little bit better. We're having some brunch or something. But like, I wouldn't commit my brunch conversations to like a published work.
I mean, you could argue that this podcast is a bit of a brunch conversation committed to tape, but we're not.
You know what? You fucking got me. I just got fucking got. I'm playing the I got jingle right
there. But we're also not advocating that other people read terrible books and review them and put themselves through the misery we put ourselves through. And we try not to advocate for dangerous ideas. Not that there's any, again, I'm not trying to be like overbearing here. I just think people should be more careful, especially in this kind of genre, in self-help or memoirs, where the targeted audience is probably other people who are also very vulnerable and looking for something comforting and looking for a way out. And when you're like, oh man, this thing helped me so much, people are going to do it. I think. The other, so following along this same thread here, I feel that Katherine May gets dangerously close to saying that conventional medicine is bad without saying it, which I don't appreciate. And it's just a couple moments, but it's also sort of the underlying theme, right? Because never do we hear her talk about speaking to her doctor, trying to find therapy, or anything like that. It's only all these alternative practices, or like, I should say, cultural practices that people do in these environments to try to cure this depression and anxiety that she has. And there are a couple of moments where it's a lot more direct. Like on page 207, she says, she's talking to Dorte Liager, who's a Danish woman, who, this is actually the cold plunge chapter, because Dorte is a member of a polar bear club, and she talks about how, she had hypermania and depression, and she tried every single drug, and her psychiatrist kept telling me it was a matter of finding the right combination, and, and I've been waiting.
Subscribe to my members only page. You too can get all this information about cold plunges and 15% off this bag of ice. I don't know.
So she said that she'd been waiting a decade for the medication to mend her, and the change came when I stopped believing it could. That pivotal point came for Dorte when she found a fresh perspective on her situation that changed the way she conceptualized it. Feeling that, yet again, the drugs weren't working, she made an appointment with her GP and happened to see a doctor she'd never met before. He told her that they could keep tinkering with the medication, but it would never solve everything. This isn't about getting you fixed, he said. This is about you living the best life you can with the parameters that you have. And yes, that is, like, no doctor is ever prescribing a medication and saying, this is going to cure your depression or your anxiety. The whole point of taking medication to regulate your mood is to make the symptoms manageable so you can have as average of a life as possible, right? So you can kind of be on the same, or as close to the same plane as everyone else. And there seems to be an idea here that, because a medication doesn't cure you, it's bullshit and you have to do other stuff to be cured. And I don't think that's a great idea to sell to people. And it's not like I'm saying, oh, don't try alternative stuff. I'm saying that it is a balance, like all things in life. Life is difficult. There are very rarely easy black and white answers to things. And, I think when you're, if you're facing like a surgery or a medication with severe side effects, for example, and there's an alternative that could just be a behavioral change, maybe try the behavioral change first, right? Like, think about, blood pressure, right? Like, you could change your diet and exercise, or you could take medication with some low risks, and it's your choice as to what to pursue. But I think a lot of the time, conventional medicine will sort of just be like, take a pill, whatever, because people don't want to make the behavioral change. And I do think it's worthwhile to consider what you can do before, resorting to a surgery or a medication. However, sometimes surgery or medication is the thing you should do. And it's not like a blanket all the time, like, oh, one or the other for everything. And I think that's seems to trip people up. I don't know. And so I just found this sort of undercurrent in the book a problem. And I don't like how it wasn't addressed. And it's not like I don't understand this. Like, I also had a period of my life where health professionals were not taking me seriously. And I was told, nothing's wrong with you, yada, yada, even though I had like dual sciatica that would render me completely incapacitated for 2 weeks at a time. Like, it was a real problem. And eventually, after getting completely fed up over 15 years, what happened to me? I ended up in a fucking chiropractor's office, a place I never thought I'd be, because chiropractors are like pseudoscience idiots. They're not real doctors, right? But this was just, you end up in places you don't expect because conventional medicine doesn't listen to you. And again, I'm telling you the story so that you understand that I'm coming at this from a perspective of sympathy or even empathy, because I've been through this before. And in my case, I was lucky, or, I did some research on the person I was seeing and made sure they weren't going to like tell me it was like ghosts in my bones, or like, crack my neck. And
we got to crack the ghosts out of your bones. I'm the ghost chiropractor. We've seen a spirit down in your spine all over here. That's why the spirit and spine, they're connected like that. You see?
No, that's a real thing. Like, that's what they really believe. That's why.
Fuck off! But don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep. That's why they're not real doctors, because they don't go to medical school and they do this weird. Other
I know
shit.
that.
But anyway,
are you telling me there's this ghost hunter chiropractors out there?
I think so. That's what I've been made to understand.
Okay, that's what I thought you were telling me for sure.
But anyway, this chiropractor I saw actually did me good because he took me seriously, took x-rays and went, oh yeah, here, you have a congenital, you were born with this condition. It's a common thing. And your pelvis is also out of alignment. And like, you could see it clearly on the x-rays. So, you know, it's like for the last 20 fucking years, if a regular doctor had just taken fucking x-rays and taken me seriously, I could have found that out. And then his prescribed treatment was just, you got to get stronger. You got to do an exercise routine and stretch consistently. You can't not stretch or do exercise or you're going to struggle with this for the rest of your life. Turns out he was right. And like, this is what I've been doing and I am doing fine. But like, I'm not sitting here saying, go to a chiropractor and it'll solve your problems. I'm saying I understand how people end up in these places where they dabble in these alternative things because you can't get an answer from your regular doctor. That doesn't mean you forsake traditional medicine. It means that you probably just have to find a different traditional doctor, right? And like, that's also what I did. At the same time I went to a chiropractor, I got a different general care practitioner and hey, that one was a lot better, and talked to them about what the chiropractor was recommending. And they were also like, yes, we agree. You know, so it's not like I'm just out here jumping into the sea and doing saunas, I don't know, finding ghosts in my blood or whatever. Anyway, I didn't, you know, I'm not trying to lecture anyone.
You see, the ghosts are haunting your spinal column, and that's why you have the double side. There's 2 ghosts on either side, and we're gonna have to do a double seance to get rid of this while I crack your spine at the same time.
Well,
all right, ready?
You,
3, 2.
Yeah. That being said, be wary of chiropractors because you don't want them crunching your neck. You don't want them doing anything that could render you even worse off than you already are. I do not recommend going to a chiropractor. This is just my anecdote about my own experience and how I just want to explain that I too have ended up sort of in these places that, you know, of the person I'm critiquing. So I'm not coming at this from like a high and mighty place. You know, I'm saying I have been there too, and I get it, but I think you still have to be careful. And the second reason I bring this up is that I think a lot of health, whether mental or physical problems people have, it's not about curing it. It's about treating the symptoms and making them manageable. And for some reason, people are obsessed with, well, for the obvious reason that they want a quick and easy cure-all. They want things to be cured forever, to never have to think again about managing a condition or doing anything, right? It's just, they just want it to magically disappear. And when someone offers you a solution that isn't a magical cure, instead of doing the work and addressing it, you know, people want the magic cure. And so they pursue all these things. And I don't know. I just feel like reading something like this, it just seems to be more of that. And it's really frustrating. Also, Chris, feel free to chime in and tell me to shut up or like tell me I'm talking out of my ass. I don't think I am. I think I'm trying to be careful about how I'm talking about this, but you know.
I think you're being very reasonable about it. I mean, like, you know, we're in our late 30s or entering our late 30s at this point. Shit starts breaking down.
We're in our mid-30s, Chris. We are squarely in the middle. I do not want to be pushed into my late 30s before my time. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. You know, but still, shit starts breaking down. You start getting a little anxious and worried about things. I went through some similar stuff that I have my own little fun conditions that I'm managing here. And luckily, I feel like I was taken seriously at most turns by my doctors.
That's called being a white man, Chris. Congratulations.
I think that's what that is. That's probably what that is. When I'm like, hey, my shoulder feels funny. I think it's my blood things. And then your doctor's like, yeah, sure, let's check out your blood. And I'm like, oh, that was easy. And then they check out my blood and like, hey, there's a weird blood thing. So I can appreciate people that don't get listened to and just, or alternatively, like have been trying stuff and aren't getting there. But to turn the focus back onto this book, I'm still confused as to what is trying to be said here other than, hey, wait it out a little bit. Let yourself feel the sad is a very valid point that I agree with. But the way it's presented here seems so disparate and loose. That I almost wish it was a book of poetry linking these themes and ideas together instead as a way to process things mentally instead of me just here like reading a memoir. I'm also just generally anti-memoir, to be honest with you.
Yeah, same. It's not my bag either. But I agree with you. I feel like this book would have lent itself more to the form of poetry. for the reasons you mentioned there, just because content-wise, I think it would have come across less. I think you wouldn't have gotten perhaps dangerous takeaways from it. There's also a point where she's like, my son was having trouble in school and I didn't want him medicated, so I pulled him out and I homeschooled him now. And you're just like,
wait, why did you jump there? Why did
yeah. So you get these like shades.
I gotta
like,
say, Paris, the white lady vibes are off the charts on this shit.
Yep, yeah, they're real high. They're real high. We're breaking through the Karen ceiling. We're now like Karenina or something. Yeah, it's and again, obviously I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but I feel like I don't know how you could write something like this without the privileges that I am guessing that this author has. Right? Because how on earth would you be like, yeah, I got through this horrible thing by like baking bread and homeschool my kid, and I don't know, like it's like what?
And forbidding Halloween.
Being terrified of teenagers, I don't know. But trying all these therapies and traveling to Finland and Iceland and Norway and the other reason, getting back on the point here, why I think this would be better as poetry is because the prose was really beautiful at times. I mean, it came through in some of the writing pieces I read earlier, but I'll choose a few other spots. It was like...
Are we moving into moment to moment?
Yeah, we're going to move into moment to moment here. So we're going to talk about prose quality and I guess not really dialogue.
You got to score. You got to score the coherence.
-1.
I just gave you a cold plunge of having to do your work.
My heart says -1. I want to be nice and say 0, but I actually think this is a real, like, I had this idea and I wanted to squeeze a bunch of things into it, and I just don't think that's and because it just has a lot of, like, the suggestions, it suggests a lot that are perhaps troubling. -1 on that. All right. Prose quality and dialogue. There's not like traditional dialogue in this. She does recount like conversations and interviews and stuff. There's nothing like too alien. Some of them feel, let's say, massaged, and also there's no way to know if any of these conversations are real. I'm not gonna like dig through. I'm not gonna like call up these people she supposedly interviewed or whatever. I don't think it's that important. They're fine. They're fine. The prose, though, was really beautiful. Like I said, I felt myself appreciating more than a few lines. And I understand why people get wrapped up in this book because it's really nicely written. It's got a lot of really nice turns of phrase. Let me see. So let's go to page 28. A little taste of this. I consider making a liquor of the quinces, but I decide, on balance, to turn them into membrillo instead, that dense Spanish jelly that sings with pork and manchego cheese. I pare off their knobbly yellow skins, dice the pinkish flesh, and boil them down into a thick burgundy paste, which spits bad-temperedly as it simmers, threatening to scald my arms. When it's set, I slice it and take a parcel of it to my friend Hanna Molinenskat, hoping she'll be impressed. Hanna is Finnish, and another innate pickler. She is intimate with winter. It's in her blood. She rarely misses an opportunity to contrast her Nordic hardiness with our pitiable English frailty. I tell her about my desire to prepare for a wintering. My mother has a word for what you're doing, she says. Talvitelat. It doesn't quite have an English equivalent, but it roughly translates as being stowed away for winter. We used to use it when we put all the summer clothes away and got the winter ones out. It was always a good moment to see them again, like having new clothes twice a year. And anyway, they go on to talk about that process, but something nice about the phrasing, I think.
Yeah, there's an intimate domesticity to that I can appreciate.
Yeah. All right, and we're going to hop over to 32 to 33. After a couple of weeks off work, I begin to wonder if I'm unwell at all. Cosseted at home, I've made my own routines that keep me on an even keel. Rising at 5 a.m. to read, a dose of hot bathwater at 7 a.m., a sedate stroll to the school gates at 8:30. In the day, I read and write and avoid coffee and try not to fret about the chaos into which I've thrown my colleagues back at work. Once a fortnight, I call the practice secretary at my GP's surgery and ask to be signed off again. Nothing has changed, I say. I need more time. I've given up drinking, just for now. I don't suppose I could ever become permanently teetotal, but at this moment in time, I have no appetite for alcohol. I suppose I'm concerned that it will further mutate whatever is in my abdomen. but I'm also suddenly uncomfortably aware of the number of times I reached for it in the last few years as a way of snuffing out the relentless days that left me feeling battered. Anxiety lurked in my body like groundwater, and every now and then it would rain, and the level would rise up into my throat, surging into my sinuses, banking up behind my eyes. The best part of a bottle of wine, or better still, 3 large dirty martinis, would quell it for a while. I felt like pouring a drink put a full stop on my day. After this point, I was voluntarily incapable. I couldn't be expected to make any more sensible decisions or to reply to emails with the necessary delicacy. I was scuppering myself. Now, my evenings have the consolation of mugs of emerald green tea made with fresh mint. It's not so bad, but the time seems to stretch, and I'm finding myself in bed by 9, perhaps earlier if I can get away with it. It's a profoundly unsociable way of living, but it gives me those clear-headed early mornings in the inky dark, when I light candles around the house and relish 2 straight hours when nobody can make any demands on me. I've got back into the routine of meditating again, now that there's time to do it. Before I sit down, I've developed the habit of opening the back door to sniff the air for a few moments. In the last few weeks, the mornings have smelled fresh and crisp, as if the encroaching cold is making everything clean. More recently, it's become gritted with wood smoke, the leftovers of fires the night before. I can smell the changing of the seasons. All this time is an unfathomable luxury, and I'm struck by the uncomfortable feeling that I'm enjoying it a little too much. Perhaps there is nothing wrong with me at all. Perhaps this is all a fantasy that I've concocted in my desperation to leave. I'm only serving my notice period, so perhaps I just don't care anymore. I know that I would certainly be making more of a heroic show of concern from my abandoned post were I not mentally already out of the door. So. Right.
Yeah.
See.
I mean, that also gives me extreme white lady vibes, but it's
yes,
nicely
it does,
done.
But yeah, I guess yes, and I chose these because I felt like they gave that duality nicely. Here we go. You know what? This is one of the moments where she considers like privilege and stuff that I couldn't find earlier, so I'll read this. There's a low brow of cloud over the water. I rest against the seawall to catch my breath and watch the yellow crested waves snap against the shore. At that moment, a text arrives from a colleague, and the sight of her name whirls me into panic. Has somebody spotted me out here? Can I justify taking a walk when everyone else is doubling up to cover my job? I think about how I'll have to explain that every step hurt, that I need to build up my strength again. Sorry, this is like a paragraph later. I'm feeling the full force of the guilt of being unable to keep up, of having now fallen so far behind that I can't imagine a way back in. That grinding mix of grief, exhaustion, lost will, lost hope. My only tenable position is to retreat into a dignified silence, but that's not what I want at all. I want to give an account of myself, force everyone else to understand. Most of all, I want to disappear. I'm almost desperate to find a way to absent myself easily from the situation, like cutting around my outline with a craft knife and cleanly excising myself from the record. But that, I know, would only leave a human-shaped hole. I imagine everybody gazing into the space where I ought to be. Yeah, this is like towards the end where she makes some points that I actually agree with. So I guess this is a decent spot. This is page 266. This is where we are now, endlessly cheerleading ourselves into positivity while erasing the dirty underside of real life. I always read brutality in those messages. They offer next to nothing. There are days when I can say, with great certainty, that I am not strong enough to manage. And what if I can't hang on in there? What then? These people might as well be leaning into my face and shouting, "Cope, cope, cope," while spraying perfume into the air to make it all seem nice. The subtext of these messages is clear. Misery is not an option. We must carry on looking jolly for the sake of the crowd. While we may no longer see depression as a failure, we expect you to spin it into something meaningful pretty quick. We don't have the answers after all, and if you can't pull that off, then you'd better disappear from view for a while. You're dragging down the vibe. This is the opposite of caring. I've never believed, as others do, that social media is a place entirely constructed of fake lives and fake friendships, but I do think it's another place to beware. There's a collector's mentality online. Our social worth is given a single, blunt number. We have to make sure that we're not fooled by it. We have to make the same assessments that we always did about the quality of those connections, their individual meanings to us, and the nurture they can realistically offer us. Just as with the physical world, many of these friends will melt away at the first sign of trouble. The only difference is that the numbers are bigger online, and our misconnections feel more visible. I'm beginning to think that unhappiness is one of the simple things in life, a pure basic emotion to be respected, if not savored. I would never dream of suggesting that we should wallow in misery or shrink from doing everything we can to alleviate it, but I do think it's instructive. After all, unhappiness has a function. It tells us that something is going wrong. If we don't allow ourselves the fundamental honesty of our own sadness, then we miss an important cue to adapt. We seem to be living in an age when we're bombarded with entreaties to be happy, but we're suffering from an avalanche of depression. We're urged to stop sweating the small stuff, and yet we're chronically anxious. I often wonder if these are just normal feelings that become monstrous when they're denied. A great deal of life will always suck. There will be moments when we're riding high and moments when we can't bear to get out of bed. Both are normal. Both, in fact, require a little perspective. Sometimes the best response to our howls of anguish is the honest one. We need friends who wince along with our pain, who tolerate our gloom, and who allow us to be weak for a while when we're finding our feet again. We need people who acknowledge that we can't always hang on in there, that sometimes everything breaks. Short of that, we need to perform those functions for ourselves, to give ourselves a break when we need it, and to be kind, to find our own grit in our own time.
That passage is perhaps the one that I have resonated with the most. And like, if that was the central theme to which all the other ideas were connected, I might have a totally different opinion of this book. I do respect hardship and unhappiness as a way to self-assess or try to listen to what your body is telling you, or, you know, not to just tamp it down and ignore it like she was saying. But then all the other things you've mentioned seem to be ways to cope, like she was saying other people are encouraging her to do.
Yeah, I don't know. She thinks all of this is like connected and clearly thinks it's all wrapped up in a little bow. I mean, fucking Penguin did, you know. But she's also an editor in the book industry, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Okay.
Who knows? I can read the rest of this because I feel like this is how she ends the book. This follows immediately after where I ended. When I set out to write this book, I fully intended to do more. I meant to travel the world in pursuit of winter, to visit locations that felt truly exotic to me, and to interview people whom I considered to have wintered in extreme ways, which she does do in the book, so I'm not really sure what she means by that. I thought that I'd find greater wisdom there than I could have found in my own backyard. I also thought that I could snatch a moment to write about wintering while I was in between winters, that I could use the momentum of the good times to prize apart the bad. But in the process, life happened. Life happened a great deal, actually. As if I'd ineptly summoned them, several winters came at once. My world shrank, literally and metaphorically. I couldn't do as much as I'd hoped. I couldn't be the person I'd imagined, cheerful, energetic, summery. In fact, I struggled. I was dragged under by periods of depression. I was gnawed at by anxiety. There were times when I thought that I probably couldn't write this, that I wasn't up to it, that doing so would bring about some kind of catastrophe of embarrassment just for having the guile to think I had anything to say on the matter. Once upon a time, this would have engulfed me entirely for a season, and I would have emerged in a year or two, shaking my head and starting again. But here I am, and here it is. The only difference, the only reason I have finished this is experience. I recognized winter. I saw it coming, a mile off since you asked, and I looked it in the eye. I greeted it and let it in. I had some tricks up my sleeve, you see. I've learned them the hard way. When I started feeling the drag of winter, I began to treat myself like a favored child, with kindness and love. I assumed my needs were reasonable and that my feelings were signals of something important. I kept myself well fed and made sure I was getting enough sleep. I took myself for walks in the fresh air and spent time doing things that soothed me. I asked myself, what is this winter all about? I asked myself, what change is coming? At its base, this is not a book about beauty, but about reality. It is about noticing what's going on and living it. That's what the natural world does. It carries on surviving. Sometimes it flourishes, lays on fat garlands itself in leaves, makes abundant honey, and sometimes it pares back to the very basics of existence in order to keep living. It doesn't do this once, resentfully, assuming that one day it will get things right and everything will smooth out. It winters in cycles, again and again, forever and ever. For plants and animals, winter is part of the job. The same is true for humans. So, it's just about thinking about things in cycles, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Okay. So it's like, sometimes she hits on a point, but the whole is just not there for me. I just
I can, based on what you just read, I get that vibe. Yeah. Earlier stuff that you put forward, I was struggling to get a clearer picture of what her central idea is. That segment really, I think, did try to help wrap it up, but it doesn't wrap up the things that I heard before. Like, how does Wolf Guy fit into this? how does the cold plunge fit into this besides
because
like
it's all just wintry, and it's how we get by. It's how, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I just don't like this project as a whole.
Yeah. I still think
but
this
anyway,
would be better as poetry.
Yeah, but anyway, the point of reading all that was really to show that the writing was nice. It was good. The writing was good. So, give this a 1 for moment to moment.
You got it.
Right, now we can talk about Terebla's presence, which we kind of already suggested in earlier sections. Chaos levels. I mean, we're definitely in rich people land where it's reality, but distorted in an uncanny way. Like you're having
anti-mattering fields.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you're having these nuanced emotional thoughts, but you're preparing fucking quince and making like special quince paste for your neighbor because your other neighbor brought you this quince. Again, I feel like the gravity's off with a lot of this too. It's kind of hard to be like, oh, we all have our struggles, but then you've got, the queen of all Karens telling you this. It's a little tough to identify with sometimes. A little out of touch. The hall levels, how often did I have to stop and go back and read again? The world really started to tilt as the book continued. The axis of Earth really just kept shifting. At first, I thought the writing was lovely and that we're going to explore, how to like cope with tough times in a realistic way for all that emotional honesty of the writing. But unfortunately, I too was a frog in a pot over a fire in a winter cabin being slowly heated until I was full of a fiery desire to, I don't know, not vaccinate my 2,000 tadpoles or something. Please help. I don't know, the amount of times I had to contact Chris or someone else to let them know what was going on in the book to maintain some sanity. I don't know, once or twice. I sent a message to you and Tris, I think, just being like, man, this fucking wolf chapter, or like, man, why are we talking about debt? Oh man, we're really off the rails here. So I don't know. Tereblo is definitely there. Say a 0 for Tereblo. I feel like it was.
Yeah, that can see. I mean, it's not as chaotic as some other stuff for sure. Like it can get so much worse.
Yeah.
I might even encourage you to put this on a 1. But
really,
if you feel 0, yes, it doesn't really feel as incoherent as when I think about Tereblo. I mean, sure, like the coherence of the that is off, but like reality still seems real. The way she can write about, those like domestic moments that I was talking about, like that seems rooted. She seems firmly on Earth still.
Yeah, I know, but I still feel like the way these concepts were, the way she desperately tried to knit together things that, I mean, and she did it artfully because she's an editor. And like, I've done this myself, writing papers and stuff, like really trying to make it a whole, and you get it done and you get a grade, but it's not.
Penguin will publish for you.
Doesn't mean it's good. I don't have to sit here and say I like it,
Yeah. I'm not going to litigate this too hard. 0 is fine.
Yeah, 0, please. Okay. Should this exist? Would readers of this genre enjoy this? Kind of hard to know. I think if you're an Oprah book person, I don't know what you're doing listening to this podcast, but you'd probably like this. I can't imagine most people would get a lot out of this unless they're also in a vulnerable state at the time of reading it, though, which is unfortunate. Like, I think, someone might find value in this if they feel like they are being pushed in their group, their friend or family group, or their society to not allow themselves time to rest and recuperate. I feel like you could get something out of this, and someone saying, yes, you do have a license to rest. We should push back against the go nature of Western society and all that stuff. Sure. But that's like a really tiny kernel to get out of reading like an almost 300-page book. I don't know that it's really worth the effort. Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? Yeah, totally. Seems like she just wanted to write about this period in her life. It's a memoir. I'm not going to tell anyone you can't tell me about your life if it's going to help you. This felt like a very therapeutic thing for the author to do. One of those books that was written more for the author than for anyone else. So yeah, I feel like she met her goal. Does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? No. Did it take something from us? Nah, it was easy to read. What should someone read instead of this? Honestly, I'm going to tell you like the National Institutes of Health site for managing mental health or your doctor's website. Maybe dial 988, try some on-demand therapy. Maybe once you're not like completely rocked and you've like gone to a doctor, saw a therapist, whatever, then sure, like, if your doctor says it's fine for you, maybe get in a sauna and roll around the snow, but, be careful about alternative approaches, especially if you're trying to look at them as like cure-alls that can turn you against traditional medical processes or medication that you may actually need for a safe, comfortable life. It's balance, folks. Be careful out there with your health. I'm not a medical professional, but I think, I can advise you to be skeptical and consider things carefully. And I think that's a good thing to do.
Hey, Paris. Score it, please. So that was technical construction 1.
Yep.
Plot or / coherence, a -1. Moment to moment was a 1. Privileged presence was a 0.
Should this exist?
And should this exist is a 0. So that is a 1 out of 5.
1 out of... Well, whenever you say that, it's not actually right, because it's not a 1 out of 5. It's a 1 out of a scale from -5 to 5, which is actually
that's a mouthful and hard to say, 11? And I don't want to do that. So,
yeah. Or 10.
Okay, but 1, it feels
in the middle.
Reasonable for what you've experienced here. Can you fix it? I'm going to stand by my like make it poetry.
Yeah,
remark.
Man, I feel like I agree with you because clearly Katherine May can write well and has an artful way of talking about emotions, and that would definitely serve poetry pretty well. So I think that would be great, because that also, I feel like I can't imagine someone writing a poem that's like, they might medicate my son, so I homeschooled him. I feel like we would avoid a lot of like shitty things.
You know what? Then Paris, you know what? Then make it a TikTok feed instead. That's probably the way to go. That's how you fix it.
You know what? Should only be haikus. Only the heart of the matter. No extra frills. Chris, I'm going to steal your idea. I think you're right. I feel like, I don't know. And I also feel like maybe this, and I don't think this is necessarily the author's fault, because clearly the author is not trying to make this a self-help book. I do think there's a problem with the way she presents it, where there's kind of a suggestion that maybe you should do these things too. She doesn't outright say it, but she doesn't say this is like a self-help book and that by reading it, she's going to fix your problems. I feel like the marketing around the book is really the problem, by saying like, oh, read this and like, it'll change your life because you'll know you can rest or whatever. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a mixed bag there, but I think the marketing framing, it could be poems only. And then I just wish that she was more careful in how she talked about these sort of strategies and her opinions on things like, traditional Western medicine, and medication. And like, I don't know, it just could have used a little bit more care with that stuff. I'm not saying this is like horrible and shouldn't exist. Everyone should be allowed to talk about how they feel and stuff. I just think it needed a little bit more care, a little bit of special handling there. That's all.
Okay, Paris. Well, thank you for getting through that winter in this summer recording session. We have real duality happening here. Thank you to our patrons and Ko-fi donors like our bad bookworms, Ben, Donnie, Emily, Jakub, Katie M, Jared, Scott, and Will. Our exacting editors, Kieran, David D, Emmy, Funny Robot with Antennas, Greg, Harry, Seven, Martin, Root Beer, Cutie, the Ugly One, Elliot, and Xander. Our loathsome librarians like Yanka, Veronica, Luchek, Patricia, and 1 in 1,000. And our pesky publishers like Miles, Austin, Patrick, Patricia, and Beast with the Least. And of course our Ko-fi donors like Mark, Tracy, our ever-faithful Kiwi Thing, and Excavating Lizard, along with Martin F. Brenna and Matthew, who relieved us of terrible books. If you want some terrible books we've read for the show that we have physical copies of, like this one, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page, or just, send us a message about it, because if they're not up on the Ko-fi page and we said on the episode, hey, there's a physical copy, it's here, so you send a message, be like, hey, can I have that one? We'll throw in a little nice, cute message for you. All right, Paris, I'm off to think about winter as a way to cope with the summer, because you win some, you lose some, and I'm losing right now. I'm losing body water from the sweat.
I think it's time for a little snack break before we record our next episode. But yeah, we'll see you. I don't know. Take care of yourselves. It is winter. Please, don't be afraid to rest if you can. If you have the means, if you have the ability, rest and retreat. If you don't, overthrow your oppressors in this capitalist hellscape. Goodbye.
Okay. Yeah. All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audiovisual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to episode 233 of the Terrible Book Club, our final episode of season 10. I'm Paris,
Talk about it.
And this is Chris.
No, there's one more. There's one more after this.
You know, Chris, it's my final episode of season
Okay,
10.
that's a better way to phrase it because I count that I'm a human being that exists and I'm going to do one after this. So, you know.
Let me maybe take that intro again because I forgot that your episode is after. You know what? Doesn't even make sense to say that. I blame the heat delirium. All right, I'm going to take that again.